Have you ever seen an empire lose a battlefield without losing a battle? Because that may be exactly what is happening right now on the edge of Moldova, where 1,500 Russian troops are still standing, but the ground under their mission is disappearing. If you like videos that turn hidden geopolitical pressure into clear stories, tap like, subscribe, and share this one with the friend who always asks, what's really going on behind the headlines? For years, Transnistria looked like one of those frozen conflicts that never truly move and never truly end. It was a narrow strip of land, small on the map, easy to ignore, and perfect for Moscow's style of influence. Russia did not need this territory to be rich. It did not need it to be beautiful. It only needed it to remain useful, and for a very long time, it was. This was the pressure point, the wedge, the reminder that Moldova could never fully relax, never fully choose its own future, and never fully escape the shadow of the Soviet collapse. Inside that small territory sat a Russian military presence, officially dressed in the language of peacekeeping, but understood by almost everyone around it as leverage, not just troops, not just weapons, leverage. And leverage matters more than size, because geopolitics is rarely about how much land you hold. It is about what fear you can create with the land you already have. A thin strip on the wrong border can be more powerful than a massive province far from the fight. For Moscow, Transnistria was never just a leftover from the Soviet era. It was an unfinished sentence, a tool kept ready for the right moment, a forward position that could threaten Moldova, worry Ukraine, and distract NATO all at once. Then history changed speed. When Russia launched its full invasion of Ukraine, the meaning of Transnistria changed overnight. Before that war, the region was a pressure valve. After that war began, the region became part of a much larger dream. If Russian forces had managed to dominate southern Ukraine, especially the coast, the old garrison in Transnistria might have become something very different. It could have turned from an isolated symbol into a connected outpost. It could have linked up with advancing Russian forces. It could have helped squeeze Moldova. It could have placed Odessa under even greater pressure. It could have become a real bridge in Moscow's wider strategy. But that bridge was never built. And now the cost of that failure is rising. Because the entire vision depended on one thing: movement. Men, fuel, ammunition, command, rotation, supply, reinforcement, political momentum. A military position far from home can survive only if it stays connected to a living system behind it. Once that system breaks, the outpost does not disappear in one dramatic explosion. It rots in place, quietly, slowly, publicly. That is the part many people miss. The real story here is not about one sudden strike. It is about the death of access. No easy air route. No friendly corridor through Ukraine. No secure Black Sea path. No realistic way for Moscow to treat Transnistria like an active military card that can be played whenever the Kremlin wants. In theory, the Russian presence remains. In practice, the options around it have narrowed so much that the force looks less like a sword and more like a locked display case. And this is where Romania enters the story in a way that changes everything. Not with tanks crossing borders. Not with some dramatic speech declaring a new age by midnight. But with something far more dangerous to Moscow than spectacle: integration. Roads, power links, legal ties, trade routes, passports, institutions, language, citizenship, cross-border identity, economic gravity. These things sound boring if you only watch war through explosions. But states are not shaped only by missiles. They are shaped by systems, and systems decide who can endure pressure and who cannot. Romania has spent years doing something Russia struggles to answer. It has been helping pull Moldova westward in ways that feel ordinary day by day, but strategic year by year. Energy links matter. Transport links matter. Diplomatic cover matters. EU access matters. Shared citizenship matters. All of it creates a situation where Moldova becomes harder to isolate, harder to scare, and harder to pull back into Moscow's orbit. That is why this moment matters so much. Because if Moscow cannot physically connect to Transnistria, and Moldova keeps integrating with Romania and the wider West, then that Russian military presence stops being an asset of the future and starts becoming a relic of the past. It is still there. But what can it actually do? That question is becoming more brutal with time. Think about the men on the ground. Around 1,500 Russian troops remain in and around Transnistria in a mission that was once meant to project influence. But today, their strategic value is deeply tied to conditions outside the territory, and those conditions have gone bad. A force can hold a checkpoint. It can guard a depot. It can raise a flag. But if it cannot be rotated with ease, reinforced with confidence, or used in coordination with a wider campaign, its meaning changes. The image stays strong after the substance weakens. That is how military myths die. Not always in fire, sometimes in irrelevance. And for the Kremlin, that may be the most painful part. Because Russia built much of its post-Soviet influence on the idea that it could freeze space, trap neighbors in uncertainty, and keep old conflicts alive until those conflicts became political chains. Transnistria was part of that method. So were other gray zones around the former Soviet world. Keep the wound open, and the patient never runs far. But now Moldova is trying to run anyway, and Romania is helping it do that. If this were only military, Moscow would know how to answer. Russia understands force. It understands intimidation. It understands escalation. But what happens when the battlefield is made of electricity contracts, border procedures, financial systems, passports, schools, diplomatic recognition, anti-corruption reforms, intelligence cooperation, and public psychology? What happens when the answer to pressure is not one heroic battle, but 1,000 bureaucratic steps that slowly remove your room to breathe? That is much harder to stop. And it is happening while Russia is already stretched by the war in Ukraine. This is the core tension of the story. Moscow once imagined the Black Sea region as a place where geography could be bent by force. Instead, geography has turned against Moscow. Ukraine did not collapse. Odessa did not become a Russian gateway. The coastline did not open. The corridor never arrived. And without that corridor, Transnistria sits where it always sat, but under completely different strategic conditions. A frozen conflict only helps you if you can still shape the temperature. Right now, Russia looks less like the one controlling the thermostat, and more like the one trapped in the freezer. And Romania understands that time is finally working in its favor. Here is what makes this so striking. Bucharest does not need to invade anything. It does not need to create panic. It only needs to keep doing what it has been doing, tightening the practical links that make Moldova more resilient and less dependent on Russian pressure. Every new connector matters. Every new investment matters. Every new legal alignment matters. Every new signal that Moldova's future is European matters. The effect is cumulative, quiet, hard to reverse. That is the nightmare for the Kremlin. Because the Russian model works best when people feel stuck, when they feel abandoned, when they feel the West is too slow, too divided, too tired to matter. But when Moldova can look across the Prut River and see a functioning EU and NATO state with shared language, family ties, and a living political connection, the psychology changes. The fear does not vanish, but the alternatives become real. And once alternatives become real, coercion becomes expensive. There is also a legal and political layer here that makes the issue even more explosive. For years, the idea of Moldova and Romania moving dramatically closer was treated like a sensitive subject that everyone understood, but few wanted to push too far in public. That caution had reasons. Moldova is divided, its politics are complicated, its history is emotional, its identity has been fought over for generations. Russia has invested enormous effort into keeping those divisions alive, but history does not stay still just because a subject is sensitive. The more insecure Moldova feels, the more attractive firm anchors become. That does not mean every Moldovan wants unification. It does not mean one speech changes reality. And it does not mean tomorrow morning the map will suddenly merge. Serious people should avoid fantasy. But it does mean the direction of pressure is changing. What once sounded impossible now sounds discussable. What once felt taboo now feels strategic. And for Moscow, even that shift is dangerous. If you're still with me, drop a comment with the word corridor and share this video with someone who thinks modern power is only about tanks. Because this story proves roads, wires, and passports can trap an army too. Because Russian influence often depends on blocking imagination before blocking policy. If people stop believing a different future is possible, they accept the old cage. If people start believing a different future can be built, the cage starts to crack. This is why symbols matter here. Language matters. Church alignment matters. Economic dependency matters. Energy dependency matters. Migration patterns matter. The more Moldova's daily life moves west, the weaker the old Soviet software becomes. Russia can still broadcast fear. It can still fund disruption. It can still amplify division. But it becomes harder to sell the idea that Moldova belongs naturally inside Moscow's sphere when the lived reality of many Moldovans points somewhere else. And this is where the Russian troops in Transnistria become politically awkward in a new way. For decades, their presence could be framed as a warning, a reminder, a stabilizer, according to Moscow's language. But what are they stabilizing now? A shrinking illusion, a depot from another era, a separatist structure whose importance has become more symbolic than operational? Every year that Moldova survives outside Moscow's grip, every year that Romania deepens the connection, every year that Russian logistics remain blocked, the troops look less like guardians of influence and more like leftovers from an interrupted plan. That interrupted plan had a name even when it was not always spoken openly. Control the coast, break Ukraine from the south, reach the western edge, turn Transnistria into an active link, make Moldova submit, frighten the region, show that geography belongs to force. It sounded bold, it sounded ruthless, It sounded like the kind of plan the Kremlin loves to imply. But a plan is only real if it survives contact with reality. And reality hit back. Ukraine fought, Odessa held, the Black Sea became dangerous. Western surveillance tightened, supply assumptions collapsed. Time, distance, and resistance turned fantasy into burden. That burden is now sitting inside Transnistria like an unanswered question. How long can a stranded outpost still frighten people who have begun to see it as stranded? That question matters because deterrence is psychological. Once a military presence stops looking dynamic, its political effect weakens. It can still be dangerous. It can still trigger crises. It can still support sabotage, disinformation, covert networks, and local manipulation. Nobody should underestimate the trouble Russia can cause through hybrid pressure. But hybrid tools are not the same as strategic freedom. They are often the tools you use when the bigger options are gone. And the bigger options do look weaker now. Russia can threaten. But can it reinforce? Russia can posture. But can it connect? Russia can warn. But can it break through southern Ukraine and reopen the route it once imagined? That is where the story becomes unforgiving. Because to change the equation in Transnistria in a meaningful way, Moscow would need a much larger regional success than it currently appears able to achieve. Without that, the garrison stays what it is, present, armed, politically sensitive, but increasingly boxed in by a reality it did not choose. And then there is the economic side, which may be even more important than soldiers. Conflicts endure when someone can still pay for the illusion behind them. Energy was once a key part of Russian leverage in Moldova and the surrounding region. Cheap gas, political pressure, controlled dependence, selective punishment. These were not side tools, they were central tools. They helped Moscow reward loyalty and punish resistance. They also helped sustain structures that looked independent but relied on Russian support to keep functioning. But when those energy flows become unstable, expensive, reduced, or politically toxic, the old mechanism weakens. Factories do not run on nostalgia. Households do not stay loyal because of speeches when heating becomes uncertain. Elites do not hold control so easily when outside money, outside trade, and outside systems start shifting. Once Russia's economic hold loosens, military symbolism has to carry more weight. And when military symbolism is also weakened by isolation, the entire structure starts to look tired. That is exactly why Romania's role feels so significant. It offers not just words, but alternatives. Alternative energy links, alternative infrastructure, alternative legal space, alternative citizenship pathways, alternative markets, alternative future. Even if progress is slow, alternatives change behavior. People begin making decisions not based on inherited fear, but on expected opportunity. And when enough people make that switch, strategy changes from the bottom up. This is what empires often miss. They think territory obeys the map, but people obey incentives, safety, memory, family, and hope. Moldova is not simply choosing between flags. It is choosing between systems of life, between uncertainty that never ends, and a difficult but visible road outward, between frozen dependence and imperfect integration, between being a buffer and becoming a participant. That choice is not easy. It is emotional. It is divisive. It is loaded with history. Yet pressure from Moscow keeps pushing more Moldovans to ask a blunt question. If neutrality does not protect us, if old compromises do not stabilize us, if Russian leverage never truly sleeps, then how long can we afford to remain exposed? That is the hidden force moving underneath all of this. Not romance, not slogans. Security. Security changes public opinion faster than ideology ever can. We have seen that pattern before in Europe. When threat feels distant, people debate identity in abstract terms. When threat feels close, they start looking for shields. And Romania, by history, language, and institutions, looks like a shield many in Moldova understand better than any distant promise. Now imagine how that looks from the Kremlin. A territory once used to intimidate Moldova is becoming evidence of Russia's own limits. A military footprint meant to project reach is now showing how far Russia's reach no longer extends. A frozen conflict that once blocked Moldova's western path is now one of the reasons Moldova has stronger incentives to move west faster. That is strategic irony at its sharpest. And it gets even sharper when you consider morale. Soldiers understand when they are holding a living front and when they are guarding a museum of unfinished ambitions. They understand whether the state behind them is moving toward them or away from them. They understand whether their mission is part of a future or part of a memory. No soldier wants to become a political prop abandoned by the strategy that created him. So yes, those 1,500 men still matter. They are armed. They are located in a sensitive zone. They sit near old ammunition stocks that make everyone nervous. Any crisis there would be serious. No one should laugh at the danger. But danger is not the same thing as advantage. A trapped force can still be risky. It is just risky in a different way. and that difference matters for Europe. Because Europe's eastern border is being shaped not only by where armies move, but by where stalled armies can no longer move. That may sound like a small distinction, but it is huge. One changes maps with breakthroughs. The other changes maps by suffocation. In Transnistria, what we may be watching is not a dramatic liberation scene, but the slow expiration of an older Russian method. Of course, Moscow is not powerless. It still has tools, and some of them are dangerous precisely because they are cheaper than a major military operation. Disinformation can inflame old fears. Cyber pressure can target institutions. Political proxies can stir protests. Regional tensions inside Moldova can be exploited. Economic pain can be weaponized. Social division can be magnified until it looks bigger than it is. Russia knows how to work inside cracks. But even here, there is a limit. Hybrid warfare can delay a country. It can shake confidence. It can poison trust. It can make reform harder. What it usually cannot do for long is reverse a broad structural shift, once enough pieces of that shift are already in place. If markets move west, if infrastructure moves west, if security cooperation moves west, if elite calculations move west, and if public fear increasingly points in the same direction, then sabotage can wound the process without truly owning the future. This is where Moldova's struggle becomes larger than Moldova itself, because what happens there sends a message to every state sitting near Russian pressure. The message is simple. Gray zone control is not eternal. Frozen conflicts are not immortal. They can last for decades. Yes, they can poison politics, yes, but they can also age badly. They can become expensive for the power that maintains them. They can turn into strategic traps when the broader region changes faster than the frozen zone can adapt. That may be exactly what we are seeing now. The land bridge Moscow once imagined is gone, not only because roads are blocked, but because the political landscape around those roads is transforming. A corridor is not just geography. It is permission. It is access. It is timing. It is control over the spaces in between. Russia has lost too much of that control to make the dream credible. If this analysis is helping you see the map in a new way, subscribe now and send this video to one person who follows Ukraine, because the real pressure points of this war are often found in the places that look quiet, and once credibility fades, fear begins to fade with it. Not completely, not safely, but enough to alter choices. That is why Romania's position matters beyond symbolism. Bucharest is not simply waiting for events. It is shaping conditions. It is increasing Moldova's room to resist. It is tightening the links that make Russian coercion less efficient. It is doing the kind of patient statecraft that rarely trends online, but often changes history in the end. People sometimes think the most powerful move is the loudest one. It usually is not. Sometimes the most powerful move is to close the exits slowly until your opponent realizes he still occupies the room but no longer controls what happens outside it. That is the image I want you to keep in mind when you think about those troops in Transnistria. Not a dramatic assault, not a movie scene, a room getting smaller, a mission getting older, a supply line turning theoretical, a political purpose losing oxygen, a garrison waking up each day in the same place while the meaning of that place changes around it. And for Putin, that may be harder to accept than a loud defeat, because loud defeats can be blamed on generals, weather, betrayal, bad luck, foreign aid, anything. But quiet strategic erosion is different. It suggests the entire method is aging. It suggests that the old formula of frozen conflict plus energy leverage plus military symbolism no longer works the way it once did. It suggests that Russia can still frighten its neighbors, but cannot always stop them from reorganizing their future anyway. That is a profound loss. It is also why this story matters right now. Not because a final legal outcome has already happened. Not because tomorrow brings some magical solution, but because the direction of power is visible. Moldova is still vulnerable. Transnistria is still dangerous. Russia can still make trouble. Romania cannot solve everything overnight. The European path is still slow, messy, and full of obstacles. All of that is true. But another truth is becoming harder to ignore. Moscow's best chance to turn Transnistria into an active southern lever seems to have passed. And every month that passes without reopening that route makes the whole structure look weaker. That is how a strategic dream dies. First it gets delayed, then it gets doubted. Then the people who believed in it start acting as if it is already over. And once that stage arrives, events can move surprisingly fast. If Moldova continues to harden its institutions, deepen Western ties, reduce vulnerability to energy blackmail, and increase practical integration with Romania, then the Russian presence in Transnistria may remain physically present while becoming politically obsolete. That is a dangerous in-between condition. Not peace, not war, not victory, not collapse. Just a shrinking pocket of unresolved force inside a region that is moving on. History is full of moments like this. Places everyone thought were permanent suddenly look temporary. Garrisons everyone feared suddenly look stranded. Borders everyone assumed were frozen suddenly begin to feel negotiable. The shift is not always announced by gunfire. Sometimes it begins when the side that once inspired fear can no longer inspire momentum. And that may be the clearest way to understand what Romania has done. It did not need to storm the position. It only needed to help make the position irrelevant. That is a very different kind of victory, a colder one, a smarter one. And maybe for Moscow, a more humiliating one. Because somewhere inside that narrow strip of land, those 1,500 troops are now caught in a brutal contradiction. They are still there, but the future they were supposed to secure is slipping away. They were meant to represent reach. Now they represent isolation. They were meant to freeze Moldova in place. Now their presence may be one more reason Moldova keeps moving. That is the reversal. That is the pressure. That is why this quiet corner of Europe matters far more than its size suggests. So when people ask whether the map has changed yet, maybe the better question is this: what happens when the map stays the same but power drains out of one side of it month after month? That is when empires discover the hardest truth of all. You do not always lose the moment the line breaks. Sometimes you lose when everyone realizes the line can never be rebuilt. If this ending hit you, hit like, subscribe for more high-stakes geopolitical breakdowns, and share this video with the one person who still thinks silent shifts are less important than loud wars. And that may be the real story here. Not that a border vanished overnight, not that one speech settled the future, but that Moscow's land bridge idea has run into the one enemy the Kremlin cannot easily intimidate anymore. A region that kept surviving long enough to reorganize itself. Romania saw the opening. Moldova felt the pressure. Russia missed the moment. And now, in that thin strip beside the Dniester, a force that once symbolized influence is starting to look like evidence that the old imperial script is running out of pages.